Imagine you've designed a new car. You did your research, you know what people want, then it's launched and it's an absolute disaster. This outcome could be due to confirmation bias. The process of gaining deep market or customer insight, then using that insight to make intelligent decisions, and then having those intelligent decisions drive rapid implementation of products and solutions can all be heavily impacted by confirmation bias. This is what we'll be exploring in this video. Hello, I'm Andrew. I help people like you explore how the human mind works and its impact on our workplaces and our lives. I tend to deep dive into topics of human biases and business agility. Welcome to today's topic, confirmation bias. Let's get into it. So what is confirmation bias? Well, as humans, we look for, find and remember information that confirms we're right. So this is amplified for things where we have formed strong views. Think of some of those topics like religion or politics. But it doesn't have to be always the emotional ones. It could be that we've just got some strong views around a particular product we have in market and why a customer segment actually loves that product and buys it. Let's now look at an example of confirmation bias. So I've picked a light-hearted one. I've picked the Homer. Now, in an episode of The Simpsons, Homer Simpson found that he had a long-lost brother who was kind of like the Elon Musk of the Simpsons world. And he designs and builds cars, and he puts Homer in charge of designing the ultimate, I think it was called the ultimate car for the American male, or the ultimate car for the American, or something like that. And so Homer sets to task and rushes off and starts being very bullish in his designs and knowing what he wants, so he's going to do it. And whilst there were a bunch of designers and engineers around him, his brother encouraged him to go for what he wants. So there was this diversity of thought available with all these engineers and designers, but Homer was like, no, I know what's best, I'm going with it. And there was no design thinking process here. There was no lo-fi prototyping to test with the market and see how they would react to certain features and things like that. It was Homer knowing that he was right and he was going to go with things, knowing what people want best. And an advocate for Homer might say, well, in what he's done, the numbers prove it, now we just need to deliver it. There's no more discussion required or analysis. But others at the water cooler that are quite concerned with how Homer's going about this task, they're saying things like, this isn't genuinely data driven. Solution looking for a problem to solve, they might be saying. So let's dig in a little more into what's going on here. So we have selective absorption. So rather than getting deep inside and picking up holistically everything we can and then sorting through that, we're actually looking at quite a narrowed view of some numbers. So for example, we might be saying, we want the loudest air horn. We want the most soundproof capsule. We want the largest cup holder. So we are looking at numbers in terms of sizes and decibels and everything like that. But we're not looking at the whole picture. We're zeroing in too much on things that suit us if we say that a cup holder that is big is great. And then what we're doing is we're interpreting that data. So furthermore to just a narrow slice of data compared to what we should be looking at, we're now interpreting it in certain ways, and this is impacting our ability to make intelligent decisions. So for example, we might say, well, the loudest air horn on this car is the best. But the loudest might not actually be the best. We're interpreting loudest is best, biggest cup holder is the best, the soundproofing, the more soundproofing, the best, or maybe the safest. We're interpreting now what we've actually seen in terms of our limited insights that we've gained. And there's a lack of robust discovery. So what we would usually do with products when we're designing them, or with projects for that matter, we would discover what we want to build and work out what makes sense, and then we would actually deliver on it. But what Homer's doing, he's not really doing any discovery here, he's going straight to delivery. I want this, we're going to deliver it like that. So not going back to customers, potential customers, or anything like that. So, what to do from here? Battling the bias. What can we do about confirmation bias? So we could consider alternatives, come up with 3 convincing negatives or alternatives for what we're about to do. We might try an options table with pros and cons for each, allowing us to better consider things before we go and deliver. Or we could get others involved, so you're not just going through the motions without genuine effort. Like at the back of an aerobics class, someone's just doing the moves but not really doing aerobics, that kind of thing. We want to make sure that we're actually robustly challenging whatever it is we've come up with, say if it's an idea. So we can remove ourselves from the process. And what I mean by this is we can separate the idea owner role from the researcher or validator role. So we apply this kind of double-blind experiment approach of sorts. So if we were doing a trial into what's potentially like a new wonder drug, we would separate the researcher administering those drugs, and they would have a mixture of some active drugs that we're trialing and then others, the control groups that might get no drugs or might get a sugar tablet or no tablet, with the other researcher that would be observing the changes in those different participants over some time. Because if we were the researcher that was giving things out and dispensing them, and we had a strong belief in the amazing potential of this drug, if we were to also be the one observing the changes, we would be biased around what we were observing. And if we think about this in terms of more of a business context, we would separate the idea owner from the lead researcher. And then we may even actually have a researcher that looks at, yes, investing in this is a good idea, and another one saying investing in this isn't a good idea, and actually looking at those 2 different angles in their research, and then the lead researcher bringing those 2 together, and then the idea owner being separate to that. And that might seem like a very elaborate way of doing things, but if we're talking about multi-year deals or multi-billion-dollar agreements, then it is fair enough to do that kind of thing. And you could actually also wind it back a little bit if it's for smaller decisions, not so elaborate as having maybe 3 researchers. But the same principles would apply, that separation that's really important. With confirmation bias, it might be worthwhile having some kind of ideas portal or funnel, depending on how you're trying to counteract, what you're trying to counteract in terms of confirmation bias, so that you're separating that idea from the owner. And this would be submitting ideas and having a group then with diversity of thought and different experiences and vantage points, assessing those ideas and whether they're upvoting those ideas or just commenting on them for some kind of judge in the end to work out which ones to take forward. It just provides a bit more robustness and tries to mitigate confirmation bias. But in the example where you don't have a good level of psychological safety in the organisation, so a junior analyst can't call out a bad idea if it's got the general manager's name on it, you might want to do things like anonymise that ideas portal or ideas funnel, So anonymizing those ideas so that you're actually assessing the ideas, not the idea and who came up with it in the one place. So there are ways in which you can separate those out, and it makes it a little bit easier for situations where it's awkward to be telling the CEO that their idea isn't great. But you still need then those executives on board to go with the result of the funnel or the portal. So if they then override it with like a captain's call or whatever it might be, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of having it in place. So these are straightforward things. They're not always easy to implement, but they're straightforward and logical things you can do to counteract confirmation bias. And the challenge to you is, where do you see it in yourself? Where do you see it and spot it in others? And then what are some of the things like these that you can put in place to try to counteract and mitigate confirmation bias? So I'll see you next time.